Hopefully that'll work. I got a slow start. I apologize about that. Yeah, so we're 50 years from Woodstock right now. It was 1969. We're in 2019. It's 50 years ago. It's crazy. A lot was going on, and um, I got to talk about it last week at the college. We did a four-person panel on the kind of history of Woodstock and the film and whatnot. And so, different. We had a guy from the film department, a guy from the music department, a guy from the lit department. I was from the history department. And so we were all talking about different aspects of the event, and kind of I focused on the culture and the cultural history behind Woodstock, because I was born in 1981, which is 12 years after Woodstock was over. And when I was a kid, you'd start hearing about it when you're younger. And, it sounded like this kind of awesome thing that took place, but happened, just generations ago, like so far in the past. Then as I got a little bit older and realized, like, wait, that was only like a handful of years before I was born. It just kind of made me go, like, wait a minute, what happened there? Because when you look back at the 1960s, you look at Woodstock, you look at what was going on in the country, what people were doing. It's very drastically different than where we were in the 80s and early 90s, and certainly from where we are today. Probably, gosh, I was probably like 12 or 13 when Forrest Gump came out, which was, it was a great movie, awesome movie. I loved it. It wasn't, they didn't go to Woodstock in that, but, they were at like the march in Washington, and they had this is all the counterculture peace movement stuff. I just remember thinking as a kid, like, hey, what went wrong? Like, where did everybody hop off the train? Because people were committed. They were committed to peace. They were committed to quality, to sharing, to just a future that we work together towards. And then somewhere in the 80s, it went very sideways all of a sudden. And historically, this is where hippies turn into yuppies, and they turn in their VWs for BMWs, and the materialism really takes place. And this might sound harsh, as somebody that's a couple generations after Woodstock. I just felt like, man, you guys gave up on the dream really quick. Like, what happened there? And part of that is, I think this is a great example of how we nostalgize the past. We look at it overly fond. We, we simplify it. So everybody was at Woodstock. That's a baby boomer. Not really, but a lot of people say they were there, or like to think they were there, or part of that, or really part of a counterculture movement. Obviously, a lot of people were. There was 500,000 people at Woodstock, so there's a lot of folks. But it wasn't like this walk in the park, right? It was rainy. They didn't have bathrooms. They didn't have food for anybody. There was kind of a nightmare of an event in terms of like what we judge events on standards by today. But it was probably one of the greatest events of the 20th century for sure. I think that when we think about things like Woodstock and think like, oh, how lovely, how ideal that would be. Like, why don't we do that kind of stuff more? Well, nobody wants to go camp out in the mud for 3 days without food, or, cell phones or electricity, or anything really. Like, people were just in like a cow field for 3 days in the elements with each other. They didn't have anything else going on there. People got lost from each other and couldn't find each other for the entire festival because there's that many people around, and there's no cell phones. There's no centralized communication really. So I think a little bit of what happened there was we remember all the good without remembering we can call it bad. It was just reality. Like, this is what an event like that would cost for us to do. Not monetarily, but relationally, right? Or just energy-wise, or comfort level-wise. Getting rid of our comforts is probably the hardest thing for Americans to do, certainly. But as we're moving into the 21st century and everybody's standard of living is raising everywhere around the world, we're much more closer today to being susceptible to the disease described in A Brave New World, if you're familiar with Aldous Huxley's dystopic novel, painting a picture of an industrial future where it's very different than Orwell's, which was written afterwards. 1984 was written after World War II, and it was, it's the world of Big Brother. It's the world of government control, heavy-handed control, limiting people's knowledge, which there's probably an element of that that's true, but with the internet, it's hard to control everybody that way. It's a lot easier to get information. In A Brave New World, the danger was not that people wouldn't have access to information and truth. It was that they just wouldn't care. We'd be too overcome with, distractions and pleasures and events we can be doing with people. And, in Huxley's world, there's even little pills called Soma you can take that make you feel happy, put you right at peace, and so you never have to think about anything. The pain is what helps us think past the current dilemmas caused by our pleasures. For instance, if any of you guys are Black Mirror fans online, or I think it's a Netflix show, right? I love it. I can't watch too many of them because I'll be up super late. I'll have, I might have nightmares even. It's a very disturbing show about the kind of hubris and potential traps that we fall into with our technologies and our advancement. Woodstock's a great example of that because it's kind of a pinnacle of our achievement in some ways. 500,000 people got together. There was no deaths. There was no real crime. There was no serious crime. Everybody got along peacefully for 3 days out in the middle of nowhere with absolutely nothing to do but listen to music and, take acid, which can go really bad, I guess, when you take an acid. But, for the most part, at Woodstock, it's this peaceful event of this massive gathering of humanity. Before Woodstock, one of the biggest rallies in all of human history where that many people had ever gotten together was the Nuremberg rallies in Nazi Germany before the war broke out. One of the last ones, 37 or 38, had maybe 300,000 people at it. So if you ever see the Nazi footage where it's just this huge stadium, it's a Zeppelin stadium. I mean, it's bigger than football, baseball stadiums for sure. It could hold hundreds of thousands of people in it. They're powerful, they're impressive, and Germans are not more hateful people than any other group of people in the world. They went off into war madness and followed Hitler and the Third Reich because they were convinced that they had achieved something as a society and that they were going to start a new order of the world to fix all the wrongs in the world through technology. So if you're familiar with all the really twisted stuff that happened in concentration camps and kind of Third Reich science labs, they're doing experimentation on people. They're just doing all these bizarre things in the name of science that obviously didn't work out well. Technology doesn't just automatically mean that we're going to produce something better. It's a double-edged sword. We wield it however we want. Cars are great things, unless they're just giant polluters, or you get in them drunk and kill somebody, or you're texting in them. There's all kinds of ways they can go bad. Let alone kind of what they do to change our society, right? And I live in California, Los Angeles County. It's an element of the car. Our whole society is designed around a car. Not everybody else's, but in California, that is definitely the case. Maybe San Francisco is an exception to that. But Los Angeles was shaped by that technology. So when I look at Woodstock, I think, well, okay, look at all the technology that's come out in the last 50 years, since 1969. It's impressive. It's maybe terrifying a little bit. But here we are, and we're kind of sitting on the precipice of what to do with all this stuff, right? What do we do with the internet? What do we do with cell phones, image processing, facial recognition? I mean, the list goes on and on. Artificial intelligence, double-edged sword. So I picked this YouTube channel name because for the last year and a half, I've mentioned this on Facebook a few times. I've been working on a book for primarily for my class, but also for my, for just publication for other people to start using. And it follows the timeline. It follows chronology and the cause and effect of events, seeing them in context with everything else going on in the world at the time, and what comes next and what comes before those things. It's helpful for me. I find it's very helpful for students trying to sort out the complexities of modern history. Ancient history, I'd say anything 150 years past is easier to understand in that there's just less to understand. There's less documents, there's less events, there's less people. Understanding the complexities of the modern world or postmodern world and how we got from any point to here, right? Even if it's just Woodstock. How did we get from Woodstock to here? How did we go from 1969, peace, love, and happiness, to kind of this bifurcated, disjointed, troubled global culture that we are finding ourselves emerging into? If any of you were fans of the show Community, it's a brilliant show. Dan Harmon's a genius. It's one of my favorite shows ever made. They've got this episode in there where they're playing around with timelines. It's a very, there's lots of gimmicky episodes where there's like a hitch or a kind of a key to the episode. And this one was on kind of timelines and how all these things went bad. And they're like, well, wait, what is this the darkest timeline? So they start going through all these different scenarios. And then it kind of leaves you on a question mark, a puzzle of like, wait, are we in the darkest timeline right now? Well, if you go back 50 years and you showed everybody at Woodstock pictures and news cycles of today, I do not think they'd be like, yeah, we've made it, we're moving forward. I think people would be horrified. And I know a lot of people that are going to check into this are probably baby boomers. You guys lived through that era. Or maybe even young Gen Xers. You were kids when Woodstock happened. We can't see clearly from one point to the next without removing ourselves to get context. Because the world we're in right now, we have adapted to, we're used to, the water just slowly gets boiled and turned up higher and higher and higher. So if we can take a step back, actually enter the world of 1969 or 1945 or 1914 or 18, 1900, 1865 when the Civil War ends, I don't know that people would say like, hey, this is the like bright and promising future of tomorrow, the future that Star Trek promised us. Star Trek goes off the air maybe a couple weeks before Woodstock. In the moon landing, it goes a couple weeks before the moon landing even, actually. And then the moon landing happens that year. But things in Vietnam are escalating and protests are going off. And 1968 is a horribly bloody year that's filled with assassinations and riots and, revolutions and war expanding. And then, kind of to top it off, right at the end of the summer there, right in the midst of Woodstock, I think maybe the weekend before, was the Charles Manson murders, or the first ones at least, which Quentin Tarantino just did I thought it was a great movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, dissecting that event, doing kind of an alternate history ending the way he typically does. It's a fantastic film. I think what was great about the film is he really like transplants people back to the summer of 1969, which was not the summer of love, contrarily. People mistake that. The summer of love was 1967, before Woodstock. After 67, you're in 1968, that kind of euphoric dream of, hey, we can all do this, is dissipating quickly. So I don't want to ramble on. I got class in just a little bit, so I got to go to that. I just kind of wanted to hop on and give just a couple thoughts about Woodstock, and I see it as relating to what I want to follow in this YouTube channel, which is looking at things from the past, but understanding why they're the same in many ways to the things of the present that we're in right now. I want to look at current events and explore the historical reasons behind those current events. Often we see news stories that flash things that get us scared or riled up or confused. Most Americans today feel less secure in their information than they did 10 years ago. More Americans today don't vote and avoid politics because they feel overwhelmed by the plethora of information available to us. So I'd like to just look at some of those things and see the reasons behind what's happening, the why, the how we got here from any point, right? So just exploring those points, looking at what they're saying about today and why they matter. And hopefully helping us as, humanity, helping us as a culture to move more in the direction of Star Trek, that kind of a future, and less in the direction of A Brave New World or 1984. So that's what I'm going to try to do on this YouTube channel. This might be a great time for me right before class on Thursdays. I might wind up doing it after class at like 10 at night, which I'm kind of a night owl, so that'd be great for me, but maybe not great for live discussion. So I'd love to get this kind of in a, like a regular rhythm to where those of you, especially friends that are not in the AV and can't ever come to our brewing dialogue discussions, I'd love to just get a regular spot where you can hop on and we can talk about stuff and could throw out questions. I can bring you guys on screen if you want, and we can kind of like dialogue over video. So on that note, I'll be heading off to teach American history tonight to my class. And I've been teaching Tuesday, Thursday mornings, this class Tuesday, Thursday mornings for years now, which isn't a great time for a lot of people that aren't college students because they're working 9-to-5 jobs and stuff like that. But if anybody out there wants to come pop in and sit in on a class on a Thursday night, I'd love to have you. You're totally welcome. Just message me, PM me, and I'll give you the details to come hang out in class. And you can come for an hour or stay for 3 hours. Take a break in the middle. Whatever. It's pretty casual environment in the class. We like to do a lot of discussion. I'm kind of working through the progressive period, the early 1900s, the social reforms going on there, Teddy Roosevelt, Jane Addams, the progressives. But next week we're hopping up into World War I. So if that's something that interests you, let me know. Come join us, hang out for the evening. On that, I look forward to feedback, hearing what you guys think. Hearing if this video even made sense. It makes sense in my head, but I don't know if I always communicate that very well. I'd love to hear kind of things that you'd love to explore, things that you'd love to know more about, or have a forum to discuss them without hostility or judgment. We can talk about anything very freely on YouTube. That's the nice thing about the internet in the age of the 21st century. We're about to move into the 2020s. That's crazy. We're moving into another decade. Okay, well, fare thee well. See you guys soon.